Our next guest is Carol Hill Evans, who's a state representative of the 95th Legislative District, which includes York City in her district as well. And good morning, Carol. Great to have you on the show again. Oh, I think we got you now. Go ahead. Good morning, Carol.
Okay. Good morning. Good to be here.
I was reading a great quote this morning. It jumped out at me, and I was looking at different quotes on law and order, policing, all that kind of stuff that have obviously been in the news because of the death of George Floyd, who gets laid to rest today. And one of the quotes that jumped out by, to me, maybe the greatest speaker of all time, Martin Luther King Jr., was this one. And I thought it really was a way to start out our talk today, where it said, law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and when they fall in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. Dr. King, obviously a remarkable man who had great insights into what law and order was and fighting for civil rights during that time. I'm looking at, and again, we had some more protests last night here in York. I'm looking at something someone said last night. I saw the New York Daily Record today where they said, the world is watching. What do we want the world to learn now from this? And one of the things that you said last week was that, you know, we're starting to see some pretty serious people start to talk about some of the changes that we want to see made. You know, the demonstrations and peaceably assembly and all that, that's important stuff. But then what is done in the time after that is much more important. What are the things that we need to do now to make sure that we progress socially forward from this particular point, from your vantage point?
We need to formulate a plan. What is the plan? Develop a process. What is the process by which we as citizens are going to expect and demand that our police talk to us, communicate with us? I know that one group is talking about a citizens police advisory board, which I think is a very, very good idea. It's something that we've been trying to develop for years, even, you know, as I served on city council. So I think that that's important, that the police understand the citizenry and that the citizenry have expectations of communicating with one another. Back and forth. It has to be back and forth communication.
I remember.
It has to come from.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say it has to come from the top. So at the state level, there are things that we can do. And if you have time, I'd love to tell you what happened on the floor of the House yesterday. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Good.
I thought that was wonderful. You know, there are 19 bills already. They're ready, Gary. And if we could just give them voice.
Carol, I'm going to disconnect with you just for a second because our line with you is bad right now. And I'm going to reconnect because I want to make sure we get clearly here. So just give me 1 second. We'll reconnect with you, and then we'll come right back, okay?
Sure.
So I'm going to have Mark reconnect for us here if we can, and then we'll get Carol back on here because for some reason we're breaking up right now, and I don't want to miss what she has to say. Do we have her back yet? So we'll try to hook that up again, and then Mark, just let me know when that's there. We're talking with Carol Hill Evans this morning, our state representative from the 95th Legislative District, and you know, one of the things that she said so far has been, you know, we have expectations. You know, what are the expectations of the police? A community-type council to work with police, something that's important. And for a lot of you may say, well, why would you need that? You know, but I think there's different ways of looking at this. And I think one of the things we have to be doing in this conversation is to at least be open to hearing all the various ideas that are coming up out there, especially of a specific nature. Do we have Carol back yet?
I'm here. I can hear you.
Good. Now I've got you back, and I think it's a little bit better line, Carol. Thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate it. But go ahead. You were talking about what happened on the floor of the House yesterday.
Well, basically what we were doing was just making sure that the speaker understands that there are bills that if we can get these bills, you know, into law, it's going to help us get to where we need to be. And this is all about criminal justice reform, but it's, you know, it's so much more than that. It's appointing a special prosecutor. So if a police officer is involved in a shooting, there's a special prosecutor. They're not more or less monitoring their own actions and doing internal investigations, which we know is extremely important, but it's also important for the public to know what's going on. And so there, you know, these bills we're going to be discussing. We're hoping that the speaker did promise that he would make himself aware of what the language is within these bills, okay, and that we would get together and try to see which one of these we can put into law to help as a guide, for what municipalities can do. I believe in local level control, but sometimes they need a little help from the state, and these bills would offer our municipalities forces.
I saw one of the things where the state police union was not very happy with what the governor came out with on June 4th in terms of some of his recommendations about various ways of overseeing the police. And I think they're looking at it and say, well, people don't trust us now. Most of us say the police do a great job, but obviously maybe, there are concerns. I mean, we wouldn't see all these protests around the country if there weren't concerns right now. What are the things that we're not getting? What if you had a megaphone right now, you could stand out on a hilltop and scream to billions of people and say, hey, here's what you're not getting. What aren't we getting right now in this conversation that maybe people, for example, I'm not used to ever being profiled. I'm not used to any of that stuff. And yet I said I'm open to hearing from people who have been profiled before and who have maybe gone through a different situation than I have. I want to hear about that. And if there are specific places where they're not getting the same treatment I'm getting, or if I'm not getting the same treatment they're getting, we ought to be talking about that as a community, right?
That's right. And so transparency. We don't want to just see statistics on one side. We want to see all the statistics.
Correct.
Show us everything that's going on. We might not understand it, but at least it's out there. Somebody's going to understand and explain it to us, and I think that's what we're looking for. We want transparency and equality. I don't want anything different. I'm not looking for anybody to point me out as being different. I'm different because I do different things. I have different thoughts, not because I happen to be an African-American female.
Sure.
And so, I'm not looking for special treatment. I'm looking for equal treatment. To me, that would be special.
And you hit on a point here. And this is one that I think we forget sometimes. And, Martin Luther King Jr., I quoted him in the beginning, talked about the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Hey, we're all different. We can see differences in each other in a whole realm of areas far beyond race. But one of the things that bothered me yesterday, somebody called and said, did you know that one of the police officers who helped the guy who killed George Floyd, he was black? I said, well, stop there. What does that mean? That all black people think the same way? Or suppose one of the people was also Vietnamese, I think. Another person was. I said, what does that mean? I said, we are people. We have the right to think on our own. Nobody's following lemmings over the cliff. Nobody's thinking in a group mentality all the time. And I don't get that. When I hear that, to me, that backs the conversation down to a really bad level. Your thoughts about that, Carol?
I agree totally. It takes us back to where we don't want to be. We have
Correct.
been, fighting the same battle for how many years? At what point are we going to stop with the rhetoric and come up with some honest-to-God ideas of things, lessons learned, and what we can learn from those lessons, and then put them into action? Put that into action. And it just, what? It has to start with conversation.
Well, that's one of the reasons we.
Don't care what you're doing. You want to go home at night.
Well, and the other part. Yeah, the other part of this, too, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, forgive me. The other part of this, too, though, Carol, is you and I can have a disagreement, and yet we can be friends, and we can come back tomorrow and talk some more. And if we explain why we believe what we believe, what is wrong with that? And if we're both willing to listen and consider where we're going to go. And I think that's where we're missing it in the country right now in this whole polarity thing. With Carol Hill Evans, state representative of the 95th Legislative District. And, Carol, You look at a lot of the protests over the weekend and late last week, and defund the police was one of the mantras that was being said. And, of course, at the end of the week, we saw this past Sunday, Minneapolis, Minnesota City Council, and of course used to be in the New York City Council, plans to disband the police department. That's a city about the size of Philadelphia. We heard both the president and Vice President Biden yesterday talk about they would be totally against defunding the police. There are places where I think community involvement is important. I actually took the COPS program in New York, in fact, with former Mayor Bracey. She and I were in that together and learned an awful lot about community policing. Your vision of policing in the community, how do we meld together the community and the police? And you mentioned earlier about having a kind of a advisory board to help on that. Is there a place for better appropriation of funds? What are your thoughts about that, just briefly? I am not in favor of defunding the police. I am in favor of having a
I haven't seen a plan to me that would work for our location. So I am not in favor of that. But in terms of, and I know I get it all about the pensions and everything, that all of our obligations. But I think when we look at funding, we need to look at training on both sides. We need to have the citizens, and I didn't go through COPS, but I went through the Citizens Police Academy that they have here in the city. And you learn so many things about what they're doing. It's important for, it's important for residents to know what it is the police are required to do, some of the things that they're up against. It's also important for the police to be sensitive to the area that they are sworn to, serve and protect. And so, to me, you can't do it in a car. You need to get out. I can remember the days when cops were walking the streets. We had, even if it was just 10 minutes in a neighborhood, it was 10 minutes. You get an opportunity to knock on a door, introduce yourself, let them know that you're here to help them if you have, any questions, things like that. Dialogue. You have to develop that. You have to develop the communications between the citizens and the police. And it's a hard time to have to do that right now, but it's not impossible. And when I listen to our young folks talk, which makes me feel so good, that's what they want to do. That is their passion. They want to make a difference. They want to have those conversations. They want to be involved in a resolution that's going to help in a situation that we're in today.
That's a great point. And I think the other part of it, too, is we have to have a respect for the law enforcement and be able to have a discussion with, not a lecturing to. And I think that's one of the things that we talk about getting back to. Hey, I don't want to miss talking a little bit about Friday with you as well. This Friday we turn green, not with envy, but we're going to be turning green in terms of the red, yellow, green. You were the first one to kind of let me know about that the other day, and I appreciated it. Talk about what that means right now for the community from your vantage point. About a minute and a half left.
Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to say welcome back to the businesses, especially our restaurants. If they were in the yellow and they were able to operate at 50%, now going to the green, they can operate at 75%. Restaurants are able to open with indoor seating now, not just outdoors, and they can do that at 50%. Child care is going to be open. Prison and hospitals will have to make their own minds as to what they're going to do in terms of allowing the public to come back into their facilities. They do continue to telework strongly. That's strong, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, are you excited about it? I mean, I feel we feel like we're coming out. I was kidding yesterday with somebody. I said I feel like we're coming out of the underground bunker and looking around to see what everything looks like now with the sunshine out. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was just down at one of the restaurants yesterday for outdoor seating, and I said, he said, well, people haven't really started to come out. We can do outdoor seating. I said, people have been in their houses for so long, they can't wait to get out. And now the doors are open, and they're still standing there waiting. Is it safe? Is it okay? What should we do now? So I think that's kind of the attitude. People want to get back out there, but they're just a little hesitant. And so as they make their way and see that, it is safe to be out there, they'll be back.
Right.
They'll be back.
Right. And we look forward to seeing that and look forward to seeing that business community come back. Carol, always appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Thank you so very much, and we'll talk again very, very soon.
Thanks, Gary. You have a good day.
You too. Take care. Representative Carol Hill Evans from the 95th Legislative District here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton.